a cannibal walking out of the mountains, a bank robber the locals called a hero, and a governor who sent soldiers to shoot miners in the street. All three stories happened in the same state, within a few decades of each other, and in every single case, the law either looked the other way or pulled the trigger itself. This was not some remote corner of the frontier. This was Colorado, and the question worth asking is not why it produced so many outlaws. It is why anyone expected it would not. To understand what Colorado was in the 1870s and 1880s, you must forget everything you think you know about frontier justice. There was not much justice to speak of. The geography alone made order nearly impossible. Isolated mountain passes, towns cut off from each other for months at a time, no telegraph lines, no reliable courts, and winters that killed experienced men who made a single wrong decision. Then the silver boom hit. Towns like Leadville went from nothing to producing $15 million a year, almost overnight. That kind of money attracts people fast, and infrastructure does not keep up. There were no proper jails, no functioning court system, and the men who were supposed to enforce the law were often on the payroll of the same mining companies and railroad barons driving the boom. In 1859, 3 separate governments claimed Colorado at once: Jefferson Territory, Kansas Territory, and the federal government. None of them actually controlled anything on the ground. That vacuum did not stay empty for long. Mining companies and railroad operators filled it, writing their own rules and hiring the men who enforced them. So when things went wrong out there, and they went wrong constantly, there was no neutral party to step in. The line between outlaw and victim was never as clear as people wanted to believe. 3 stories prove it. If you want more stories like this one, subscribe to Gunslinger Gazette. We cover the real history of the Wild West, the parts that do not make it into the textbooks. November 1873, a group of about 20 miners in Utah heard rumors of a gold strike near Breen Ridge in the Colorado Territory. They needed a scout. What they got was Alfred Packer, a man who had already failed at nearly everything he had tried, discharged twice from the Army because of epileptic seizures, and by most accounts, a belligerent, dishonest drifter who could not read a map. One member of the party, Preston Nutter, later called him a whining fraud, but the miners did not have better options, so Packer got the job. The group made it as far as Chief Uray's Ute encampment near present-day Montrose, Colorado, where Uray fed them and gave them a clear warning: do not cross the San Juan Mountains in winter, wait for spring. Most of the party listened. 6 men did not. Packer convinced 5 of them he knew exactly where he was going. On February 9, 1874, Alfred Packer led Israel Swan, James Humphrey, George Noon, Shannon Bell, and Frank Miller into the mountains. They had 14 days of provisions for a 75-mile trek, no flint, inadequate clothing, and almost no ammunition. 2 months later, Packer walked out alone. He showed up at the Los Pinos Indian Agency on April 16th, stumbling into the mess hall, crying out for shelter. The men inside noticed 2 things immediately. He was not starving, and he was spending cash from more than one wallet around town. When Preston Nutter arrived and confronted him, Nutter recognized Shannon Bell's pipe and Swan's Winchester on Packer's person. Packer's punchier story kept changing. Then 2 Ute hunters walked in carrying strips of human flesh. Packer fainted. What followed were 3 separate confessions, each one different from the last. The 1883 trial in Lake City heard testimony from Swan's family confirming the old man had left camp carrying $6,000 in cash and gold. The prosecution argued this was not survival, it was premeditated robbery and murder. The physical evidence backed them up. The 5 men were found together, not scattered across weeks of travel as Packer claimed. Some had been bludgeoned while they slept. But here is the part that tells you everything about Colorado in this era. Packer escaped from jail because county officials refused to fund a proper guard. The system failed before the crime, during the investigation, and after the conviction. While Packer was rotting in a jail cell waiting for a trial that almost did not happen, a different kind of outlaw was learning the landscape of Colorado and learning it well. Robert Leroy Parker, who most people knew as Butch Cassidy, wasn't desperate. He wasn't starving in the mountains or making decisions under duress. He was methodical. By the early 1880s, he was working the same San Juan region Packer had stumbled through, running cattle, some of it rustled, and studying how money moved across the frontier. He understood something most outlaws didn't. The real power in Colorado wasn't in the mountains. It was in the banks and the railroad offices, and those institutions were already taking from the people around him. On June 24, 1889, Cassidy and the McCarty gang rode into Telluride and walked into the San Miguel Valley Bank. They left with $10,500, no casualties, clean exit. The whole thing was over before most of the town knew it had started. What made it remarkable wasn't the execution, it was the reaction. A lot of the miners and ranchers in the region didn't exactly mourn the loss. The same banks financing the silver boom were charging those men ruinous rates and foreclosing on their claims the moment prices dipped. Cassidy robbing the San Miguel Valley Bank felt to some people less like a crime and more like a correction. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency didn't see it that way. Their files on Cassidy describe a man who was careful, intelligent, and deliberately hard to catch. He used Colorado's mountain geography the same way the mining companies did, as a tool for control. The hole-in-the-wall network stretched across Wyoming and Colorado, and Cassidy moved through it with a precision that frustrated every law enforcement effort aimed at him. Here is what those Pinkerton files also reveal, though. The detectives pursuing Cassidy weren't working for the courts. They were working for the railroads. They operated outside official jurisdiction, answering to corporate money rather than any elected authority. So you had a situation where the men chasing the outlaw were themselves unaccountable to the public, hired by the same institutions that had helped create the conditions driving men toward outlawry in the first place. Cassidy robbed the machine. The machine hired its own army to hunt him down, and the actual legal system barely factored into it. That dynamic corporate power filling the space where law should have been didn't just produce folk heroes like Cassidy. In Leadville, it produced a massacre. By 1880, Leadville was the richest silver camp in the world. $15 million a year came out of the ground. The town had opera houses, hotels, and millionaires. It also had miners working 10-hour shifts in tunnels flooded with toxic water, breathing bad air, dying young, and taking home $2.50 a day for the privilege. In May of 1880, they walked out. The demand was simple, $3 a day. The mine owners responded by importing armed guards and going straight to Governor Frederick Pitkin. Pitkin declared martial law and sent the Colorado State Militia to Leadville. Officially, they were there to keep order. In practice, they were there to break the strike. The Denver Tribune covered it as a crisis of dangerous agitation. What the Tribune did not mention in its coverage was that the same financial interests backing the mine owners also had ties to the paper. The press, the governor, and the militia all moved in the same direction, and that direction was toward the men with money. Strikebreakers moved in under militia protection. Union organizers were beaten. Within weeks, the strike collapsed. Not a single mine owner was charged with anything. Not one guard faced prosecution for the violence. The striking miners were blacklisted, meaning the men who had asked for 50 cents more a day lost their jobs and their ability to find new ones. What the Leadville strike exposed was not just corruption. It was the complete capture of Colorado's legal apparatus by corporate money. The governor, the courts, the press, all of it bent toward the same set of interests. And this was not a one-time failure. The same pattern played out in 1903 and 1904 during the Western Federation of Miners strikes, and again at Ludlow in 1914 when the Colorado National Guard attacked a tent colony of striking coal miners and their families. Leadville was the blueprint. The names changed. The outcome did not. Packer, Cassidy, Leadville, 3 stories, 1 through line. Colorado was not dangerous because it attracted bad people. It was dangerous because the system meant to restrain bad people was itself rotten. Packer fell through every crack the frontier had to offer. Cassidy thrived precisely because the institutions he robbed had already abandoned any pretense of fairness. And the miners of Leadville discovered that the most dangerous men in Colorado were not the outlaws in the hills, they were the ones with militia contracts and printing presses. The Wild West wasn't wild by accident. Subscribe to Gunslinger Gazette and we will keep showing you exactly who built it that way.